But at the same time, if you wait until you've got the perfect time and perfect situation, you'll be waiting the rest of your life.
Hello and welcome to the Being an Engineer podcast. Today's guest is Keegan Schoch, a mechanical engineer, leader, and entrepreneur who founded Poindexter by Design, a company delivering on-demand mechanical engineering services to support innovation across industries with nearly a decade of experience at Aerotech and dual degrees in mechanical and nuclear engineering from Penn State. Keegan blends technical expertise, creativity, and leadership to tackle complex engineering challenges. Through Poindexter by Design, he's redefining how companies access cutting-edge engineering solutions. Keegan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Aaron. It's a pleasure to be here today.
So what made you decide initially to become an engineer?
Yeah, I really appreciate this question. I think it's a super important question to ask, especially for any in your audience that haven't pursued the degree yet and they're thinking about it. You know, it's something to really dwell on and ask yourself before you commit those resources. And in my case, I had a couple of main drivers. Firstly, and at the risk of sounding somewhat campy, I love the idea of being able to create, design, improve, really affect change. So you mentioned the nuclear engineering degree, and that was actually my initial interest, more so than mechanical. I meant to go for nuclear. Penn State had this awesome dual degree, so I pursued the two. It seemed like, bearing in mind this was early 2000s, we were, possibly on the verge of this nuclear renaissance. This was pre the Fukushima disaster and things like that. European pressurized reactors projects were in full swing. It seemed like a really important thing to be a part of for important progress. So, but by the time I got those 2 degrees, had gotten out, done some internship work and whatnot, my interest had really shifted. And I started to be a lot more drawn toward that ME world. And for obvious reasons, there's a lot more creativity, flexibility in that realm. And that really appealed to me. So that's kind of the first driver. The second driver was, and I'm sure a lot of you out there have experienced this, engineers have always been presented, at least to me, as essentially wizards, right? I'm thinking Gandalf with a calculator. Yeah, it was something super cool. And it came with this.
Appreciate the nerdy Lord of the Rings reference.
Yeah, I actually have in the background. I know you guys can't see it, but he's back there backing me up every day. So, but yes. It came with this level of academic prestige. At least that's how I perceived it. And that really resonated with me. And I wanted that challenge. One kind of interesting side note that goes along with that, though, I was solid in STEM. Of course, but I was better. I was actually a lot better in areas like writing, debating, constitutional law, that type of avenue. So I don't think loving math, for instance, is necessarily a great reason for being an engineer. You have to be proficient in those areas to get the tools and those skills that you need, but it doesn't produce, in my opinion, doesn't always produce that long-term drive to become an excellent engineer. Some of those softer skills and a clear why are just as important in my experience. I'd be curious if that's kind of been your experience as well, Aaron.
Yeah, I love what you're saying there. I think the soft skills are often underrated and are super, super important. We have a volunteer organization called CAD Club where we teach middle school and high school kids how to use CAD and some simple engineering principles. And we talk about kind of a life skill. We call them our CAD Club tenets. One of them we talk about each class, and one of them in the very beginning, the first couple of classes, I think, is this idea of soft skills and how if you are the best person in the room technically, but your soft skills are garbage, there's a ceiling. There's a pretty definitive ceiling to how far you can go in your career. But if your soft skills, communication, negotiation, getting along with people, if those are really, really good, and even if your technical skills are just, kind of MVP level, minimum viable, there's almost no limit to how far you can go. So I think being able to get along and talk with people, those soft skills are super, super important.
Yeah, Yeah, that's completely been my experience. And if you're absolutely terrible at math and science, it's going to be a long haul, right? There's some baseline there, but yeah, those soft
Yeah.
skills, it's just invaluable, and they can't be overstated. I
Yep.
think
Definitely.
I think the other kind of interesting follow up to this, and maybe targeting the engineers that are people that are listening to this that are already engineers. The great question is, why do you continue to be an engineer? Right? What motivates us today? And this evolves over time, at least in my experience in the 20 odd years since I decided to pursue it way back in early high school. And for me, it's a simple answer. I love to build. I do enjoy. What does that mean? Build, right? I do enjoy hands-on work. I think that's super fun and hobbies, but it's much broader for me personally. That building means building teams, building businesses, skills, goals, autonomy, systems, processes, well-designed things, right? All of these are applicable. And I also like to point out that I don't necessarily think building always is synonymous with scaling, by the way. Building can be optimizing, not numbers or growth for their own sake. So I think that's another really important question as you grow in your career. And I'm still
Yeah.
growing. So
Now, I feel the same there as well. I use the word create, but I often say what I really love to do is creating.
mhm.
There are different kinds of engineering. There's sustaining engineering. I don't think I would enjoy that very much. And honestly, I'm not the best engineer out there. Most of the people on my team are better engineers than I am, maybe all of them. But I'm really good at creating new processes and creating new ideas and new paths to pursue for the business. So I've really enjoyed being a business owner
Mhm.
because it kind of does take me out of the engineer role and allows me to create, at least commercially, a little bit more, which has been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit about Poindexter by Design. I'm curious to hear where the name comes from. It's a very distinct, memorable name.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that and what Poindexter by Design is.
Sure. Yeah. So uh, just starting with the name itself, Poindexter, if you look it up, this cartoon character, some may know that, just this super nerdy person, I say that word very fondly, considering myself definitely a nerd in a lot of ways. So that's a really positive, has a really positive connotation. So, we love what we do as engineers. We love being business owners, but we also like doing the work ourselves. And that's been we're still a small team of 3 engineers, and that's been a big part of why we've kind of maintained that smaller size, because we get to do both, right? We get to be entrepreneurs, we get to build a business and do interesting things, but we also get to do the work ourselves. So we really enjoy sort of that nerdy aspect, being able to do that professionally. And so that Poindexter guy and our little logo that kind of goes with it, uh, sort of says it all, right? So this guy's got his little pocket divider with his little engineering tools and things like that. So we wanted it to be fun and kind of allude to the fact that we're fairly different from a traditional engineering service provider. So, and as far as what made us kind of go after this. By the way, I did co-found this with my really good friend John Bassa, and we kind of came up with that together. And why we wanted to do it, in a word, I would say freedom, using Braveheart's rendition of William Wallace's famous line, right? Freedom. But in all seriousness, it kind of goes back to that whole creating or building something that we wanted. It made a lot of sense for us to double down on building a business that was based around these marketable skills that we had acquired over decades of industry work. We loved engineering, and we had developed that history there. Particularly for us with our background and particular engineering interests, that was industrial machine design, analysis, and drafting, that type of work. In the beginning, just kind of as an interesting side note as well, in the beginning we tried a lot of ancillary services. We tried to provide pretty much everything we could think of when it came to mechanical engineering services, and that's I think a pretty rookie mistake. that a lot of people would make. It makes a lot of sense. Try to be everything to everyone. But in the end, we're learning that focusing just on this core competency really ends up being a much more clear and attractive value proposition. And it interests the right clients in the end. Some of the things kind of separate us, do a little plug here, from this traditional engineering services, are really kind of one, we're flexible and we're a very low friction to engagement. So we're really willing, and we furthermore excel at integrating with existing engineering teams. So that kind of sets us apart. This is a combination of both the tools that we use, which we'll probably touch more on, and our mindset, right? So the more traditional engineering services provider typically receives a really well-defined scope of work from a prospective client. They go off and do this work in relative isolation, and then they come back with these predetermined deliverables. And we can, and sometimes we do work that way, but that's not always going to deliver the best result for the client. Sometimes it's working within the organization itself, and that's been our niche and kind of our size. And like I said, some of the tools we use allow us to do that really well. Another thing that's a little bit different from your traditional approach is just being like super adaptable with different, we offer a wide range of softwares and things that we work in. Our niche is Onshape. I'm sure we might touch on that again. And then just having that broad industry experience to be able to switch gears, to have a lot of different solutions and things. And then, I again, this is something we'll probably touch on more, but building the meaningful partnerships. So, rather than, a larger services provider, they just want that kind of one-off large project and they're happy to get that and they move on. We're thinking, what's the best interest of the client here? How can we perform our work with that end in mind? Even if that puts more burden on us in the short term, we're always thinking long-term relationships instead of one-off projects. So long spiel there, but that's kind of how we got started, some of the ways that we've evolved in our offering, and kind of the niche things that set us apart from traditional companies in this space.
Let's talk about the tools that you use for a bit. I mean, one of them is Onshape, and I would love to hear more about that. How did you get into Onshape initially? For those who don't know what Onshape is, maybe just a quick 30-second plug for them.
Yeah.
And what other tools are you using that allow you to work so seamlessly with other engineering teams?
Yeah, absolutely. So Onshape is a cloud-based CAD system. So they were originally founded. I know you've had some of the speakers on this podcast who could talk to this in much more detail. The founder, John Herstick, that could talk in a lot of detail here about this. But what's really beautiful about it is, think never hitting the save button again on your files or crashing or anything like that. It's beautiful. It's really this cloud storage system that has CAD and CAD capabilities in front of it, and it's really fantastic for a company like ours where we're trying to go in, work remotely, 99% of the time with other companies. And in a lot of cases, we're working within a company's enterprise system, just a type of system within Onshape, and going in and doing work right inside of their infrastructures with whatever kind of restrictions and safeties they want to put in place to prevent us from getting into intellectual property that we don't need to see. There's all of that, but that allows us to just sort of jump in, work right alongside their engineering teams in a way that really isn't possible. Not to the same level of ease where you've got static files that you're passing back and forth and things like that. So we came from SolidWorks, which we still use, by the way. We have a lot of clients that still use SolidWorks, and we like it a lot. It was something that we used for a long time. We had a lot of experience in it, but when we were getting started, the cloud-based nature of Onshape just seemed to really align with kind of our long-term vision for how we would operate. We wouldn't be on site. We wanted to kind of work within companies in a lot of cases. So that really lent itself. Some of the other tools we like to use, and this has been an evolving process of how to manage juggle a bunch of different projects, clients, tasks in those projects without getting mired in, really big Gantt charts and these big timelines and like complex. There's a lot of great software out there that was just too far for us, or a lot, sticky notes just weren't enough. So we've actually been using a really great application called One IPM, integrates with Onshape. So we're able to stay within the CAD system we're working with, and it's designed by engineers for engineers kind of thing. And we really love it because you can link your tasks directly to your part studio or your assembly that you're working on. You can create tasks for other users in your company. So it's great for the project manager. It's also great for the frontline engineer. So those are just a couple of the tools we like to use. As far as communication goes, we have to be, and this goes back to being adaptable, because we're working with clients very closely instead of just sort of siloing the projects on our own. We're having to acquire pretty much every form of communication application out there. So we're daily using Slack, Teams, Google Meet, traditional email, like any format that you can imagine, just so that it's really easy to use us and it's really easy to get a hold of us. So that goes back to that low friction thing. So those are some of I'd say the key tools. On the analysis side, we do a lot of FEA work. We've also done some CFD work pretty extensively. We use both SolidWorks simulation and we use SimScale, which also ties in with Onshape. So those are that's another kind of cloud-based application out there that we really like.
I think Onshape is so wonderful. We use it in our CAD Club program with these kids because there's nothing to install. It runs just great on a crummy public school issued laptop.
Right.
It's free for students anyway, and even for non-students. I think they have a free version.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of great stuff behind Onshape, and I really think that they're kind of the up and coming. I think SolidWorks better watch out because Onshape might start eating their lunch.
Yeah, it's really interesting because like you said, we're seeing sort of the transition in some companies to things like Onshape. It's really great when you have a lot of employees that work remotely as well, or, during COVID, it was a really attractive software. I think you still have these really big companies that have used SolidWorks for a super long time. They have so much infrastructure built around it, or other similar CAD systems, right? It's going to be hard to see those change, but for a new startup that wants to be super flexible and get going, or, I'm not saying you can't convert as a big company, but yeah, we've really come to love it. We were skeptical in the beginning because we were, ardent SolidWorks users. It's hard to change, but, yeah, it's fantastic for a lot of reasons. And they're just constantly rolling out improvements. Even in the last several years since we started using it, it's very impressive how much has improved, and a lot of the functionality, and thinking about like sheet metal and cutlass and things like that have come so far. It's a very competitive CAD system, and it's been a great niche for us because there are very few consulting companies in this space. Very few. So I guess I shouldn't say that too loud. But, yeah.
I'm kind of I'm curious about how many companies out there are using Onshape. Obviously there are, but SolidWorks is the incumbent. Mm-hmm. Has it been challenging to find companies who are using Onshape, or that niche really comes in valuable for you guys?
Yeah, so Onshape is very, very, very careful about keeping their client list very safe, which I would do the same thing if I were them, of course. So it's been a little bit of a challenge. I think there are a lot of companies out there. They boast a very high, millions of users. I don't know how many of those are paid, of course, versus some of the free accounts that are public. All of your data and creations on there are public if it's a free account. But there are a lot of really good companies, certainly way more companies than we could support on our own. So it seems like it's really growing. It'll be very interesting in the next, 10, 15 years, how much market share they have.
One of the things that you mentioned earlier was connecting on a kind of not personal, but establishing meaningful relationships with your customers is a way to build a relationship and develop business with them. I'm going to take a kind of a tangent here, and then I'll come back to really the question I'm going to ask you is, what are some of the strategies that you've done to do that? The tangent here is that years ago, Pipeline attended this event, and the event was kind of unique, where the event organizers, they brought in hardware startups and they brought in service providers. So there was engineering, that was Pipeline. There was marketing, there was finance, there was, graphic design, right? Kind of all the stuff, ergonomics people, all the stuff that a hardware startup would need to get moving in the right direction anyway. The event was just a day long, so it's not like, we're going to have a final product or anything, but at least it was enough time to start pushing them in the right direction. And the format of this thing was the service providers didn't charge the startups anything directly. I think the startups, they paid something to the event organizers, but the service providers didn't charge anything. We showed up and we solved a real problem in real time. So Pipeline got paired with this medical device company, and we did some CAD concepts. To date, they only had kind of back of the napkin sketch. They didn't have any engineering in house, and so we put a CAD couple of concepts together. This is what your back of the napkin sketch might look like in 3D, and they were able to spin it around and see some details, and all of a sudden this started coming to life for them, right? Like finally they could start seeing their vision in digital reality anyway, and it was super valuable. And we got to know them a little bit. We gave them something for free. And then after that event, they reached back out to us and they said, "Hey, what you guys did was so great. Now we know you, we like you, we trust you, we'd like to work with you." And we ended up working with them for years after that. And we're actually organizing an event, quick plug for PDX 2025 right now, where we're trying to create that same environment where we have providers coming in to exhibit. It's kind of like a trade show where they have a booth and they're showing their products and their services. But a requirement for all the exhibitors is that they provide some kind of meaningful value for the attendees, and meaningful to the level of, like, you would typically charge for this level of value. But at this event, they're not charging the attendees anything. Could be some kind of training, maybe real-time consulting on something, whatever it is. And the idea is that through doing that, now the attendees, they know these exhibitors, they like them, they trust them. And so hopefully that leads to business afterwards. So anyway, I found that to be a really great strategy in terms of developing relationships with companies that we want to work with. That's just one way, of course. So I'd love to hear a little bit about some of the strategies that you guys have used to do that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting event, and I definitely want to follow up on that for our own company.
Oh, great. Yeah, we'll talk about that after.
Yeah. So that brings up some really, really good points about this. And we knew it was going to be a challenge from the onset, and it has proven to be, part of what takes a while to build that foundation of clients, that client base, acquiring clients. There's so much opportunity out there in industry. There's no shortage of need for high quality engineering work, even at a contracting level, not necessarily employed. It's just getting in the door, right? That's been one of the harder things. And a lot of, let's say, the vast majority of our clients they have to come through some kind of direct referral. It's word of mouth, some kind of organic reference. That's really critical. So I think what the event that you mentioned really highlights is that in the end, people are very social beings, and we need that kind of initial trust. Even when it's a very technical, very business sort of transaction, you still need that sort of like face to face. Okay, we trust you. We've seen firsthand you can produce nice work. We like working with you. I think it's really important. So on the front end, in our case, we haven't actually attended any kind of event like that. But what we do on the back end when we've gotten that opportunity is we're really, really careful about doing exactly what we say we're going to do. So once you've gotten that opportunity, it's really critical that you're super consistent. You define and understand, you perceive the client expectations, and then you define those really well. And I don't mean it like a slow sort of rigid statement of work kind of thing. Just like, what do they really care about? What are the key drivers for the project or what they need done? And then nailing those, right? So if you promise a certain cost, you got to stay within that cost, barring some catastrophic scope or something, scope creep. But, lead time, if they need this within 2 weeks, you got it. And you say you can do it, you got to do it, So and it's surprising. It sounds really simple, but a lot of companies don't do that, right? They win the work and then they run over by 2 months or 2x the budget or something like that. So for us, we have a very high retention rate. We shoot, the last few years we are seeing repeat clients of like 75% of our work continues to be from kind of this returning client base that we have. So I think what we're doing is working. And for us, the challenge is, getting in the door for the most part. I think the other thing I say and this highlights again, what you guys did it was an in-person event, correct? So where possible, even though it's less comfortable, trying to still have in-person meetings, or where that's not feasible for you or the client, having video calls, right, is better than just a phone call. But a phone call is better than just Slack messaging or an email, right? So trying to work in this personal forms of communication, because ultimately people are very social creatures fundamentally, and that's really critical to building trust, I think. So
yeah, I agree. In person is always better. Get in person, face to face with someone.
Yep.
All right. Well, I will take a very short break here and share with everyone that the Being an Engineer podcast is brought to you by Pipeline Design and Engineering, where we don't design pipelines, but we do help companies develop advanced manufacturing processes, automated machines, and custom fixtures, complemented with product design and R&D services. You can learn more at teampipeline.us. We've got some cool case studies there to take a look at, as well as some funny videos about here at Pipeline, we don't do pipelines. The podcast is also sponsored by The Wave, an online platform of free tools, education, and community for engineers. You can learn more at thewave.engineer. And today we have the privilege of speaking with Keegan Schoch today. So Keegan, talk a little bit about, are there any trends that you have seen in the engineering space recently that you're particularly excited about?
Yeah, I see that there are, kind of off the cuff here, two things that really, really stand out for me. Number one, and especially as it pertains to our business too, because those are the things that catch my ear. One is the shift in the last few years to that remote working. That's not a new thing, but it was an enormous benefit, like I mentioned, to our web-based engineering services. And a couple of interesting things that come along with that, though, are this higher level requirement to be able to communicate quickly through various channels that is very different than it was even 10 years ago, right? Just prevalence of being able to just message somebody and you're seeing their green status and things like that. It's a very different world in that regard. And it comes with this heightened expectation of just super fast response times. And that can be, it's a positive thing for us. We get the chance to show how responsive we are to our clients by always, getting back to them very quickly, very professionally, in whatever format they prefer. But it can also be something to manage where you're having to kind of silence a lot of that when you need to get into that deep work, Cal Newport's deep work state, right? That's really important for getting that high quality engineering output completed. And then, comes back again to with that remote working. I think that CAD systems like Onshape and what they're doing, or SimScale, that's really going to be super important, especially in the engineering world. And then the second trend, of course, and the obvious buzzword of the day is AI, right? I think we're going to see a tremendous reshaping and optimizing of engineering workflows. Information is so accessible, synthesized, streamlined. It's just going to continue to be better and better. which is, it's exciting to me. And I think that specifically some of the ways that we've interacted with CAD, or even some of the more advanced analysis tools, I think long term are going to be more intelligent. There'll be more semi-automated kind of smart processes within those things. It's still going to require creativity, at least as far as I can see. But for me, this is as an engineer, this is a really exciting progress. We like to see progress and optimization as engineers. So it's something to embrace. And I really get excited about the idea of these types of tools allowing us to spend more time doing those high value creative tasks that require both hemispheres of our brain and less of that sort of stringent, well-defined, repetitive task work that comes along often with a lot of engineering. So those are the two I would really point out.
Yeah. Follow up on the AI. How are you using ChatGPT? I'm always interested. I think for the most part these days, it's not are you using ChatGPT? Pretty much everyone is. It's how. What are some of the ways that you have found to use that effectively?
Sure. So we're still trying to figure out how to best use it, and especially in a way that's careful. So we're cautious about doing anything that could lead to a breach in the confidential information. We have a lot of very sensitive IP in our possession, and interacting with any of those is something we have to be really careful about. At the same time, though, we've used some really cool tools to generate some images and things like that have been really helpful for presentations or developing concepts that can be really, really powerful. And that's something that we're trying to figure out how to incorporate even better. Can we train tools like this to just help us really speed up that, and at least that rough brainstorming when we're trying to come up with a solution. There's going to be a lot of work there to do that, but I think there's a lot of opportunity rather than having to literally hand sketch, or you get into do a lot of time consuming CAD work to develop concepts that are ultimately thrown out. Right. So if you can kind of shortcut that, get what's in your mind, into like a chat GPT or whatever to help you generate those ideas really quickly. I think there's a lot of cool opportunity there. And then on the business side, we haven't implemented this. We were actually just talking to one of our clients who's found some really interesting techniques for automating a lot of their emails, right? So they were finding they had a lot of kind of repetitive sales emails that they were sending, or follow-ups that they needed to send, or sending invoices or anything like that. And they've gotten it down to a science where they can just kind of drop files into this repository, and it spits out, and they hit go, and they send this beautiful email. So it's pretty exciting, and I think we need to keep finding ways to try to bring it in. But in our case, we have to be pretty careful. So
yeah, same here. Customers are very, very concerned about confidentiality, so of course we have to take that very seriously. That's cool to hear that you've been able to use ChatGPT, I guess DALL-E probably, or whatever implementation you're using to create images for like concept design. That would be an interesting thing to try that I haven't thought about doing.
Yeah, we haven't had great results yet, but we haven't also put a lot of effort into it. But it's been, especially for creating images of a very general idea that are high quality enough to put into like a client for presentation or something. It's just, hey, this is just a very rough, it's cool. It generates this cool kind of artsy image. We've done some to that level. I'm saying what I find really exciting is to think about spending the time to teach these types of tools to get to the point where it can help generate real concepts for us. Or say it's still sort of wacky, but it's like, oh man, it brought in this element I wasn't really thinking about, and that from there, it gives me this other great idea.
Yeah, I've used it a lot for writing proposals. Again, obviously, we're not putting confidential information in there, but there might be a data sheet for a pump or something, And instead of opening up that data sheet, what was the flow rate for this pump, or what were the power needs? I can just type into Jeep, hey, tell me what the flow rate is for this pump. I can't remember what page that was on, right? Instead of looking through 50 pages of a PDF, things like that has been really helpful. Well, let's see. For younger engineers who might be interested in starting their own engineering consultancy, what kind of advice would you give them?
Sure. Yeah, I have thinking about this question. There's a lot to say, and so here we go. First thing is, I'd say, especially if you're thinking about doing consulting or engineering contracting in particular, there's no replacement for that in industry experience. You really need to spend some time in industry, in my opinion, gaining that how-to knowledge, that you just can't learn in school in a lot of cases, no matter how great the school is. Like, obviously, I'm a big proponent of education, but there's just that real world industry experience. Go out, get some of that, and the best way that you can accelerate the benefit of that is to give every task, every assignment, everything you've got, right? Doesn't matter if you're interested or not. Figure out how to make it a really worthwhile endeavor. And it benefits you because you're going to learn more and you're going to perform better and you're going to get more opportunity a lot faster. And, some of these, like, again, sort of soft skills, right? Being proactive in a professional, non-pushy way, trying to find those opportunities, being curious, reading broadly, being hands-on, respecting everyone within the company, right? Secondly, I'd say in terms of especially like developing the business side of things, the business acumen and whatnot you would need. There are lots of ways to self-educate. Again, really can't emphasize enough basic accounting. Even if you aren't the finance guy running the business, right, you have to understand how cash flow works. This is the lifeblood of business. You need to be able to model it, forecast it, how to budget, interpret basic financial reports and things. A lot of great books, The Accounting Game, Profit First. There are tons of them out there. And then I'm also, just to use the phrase, a pretty big fan of sending it where possible, though, too. There's no a faster way to expedite learning rather than just trying and failing, right, when it comes to business. And you've got to do this, of course, in a way that considers your specific life stage context. I have to say this, you have to build in those contingencies to mitigate risk, right, to an acceptable level. Make sure your fundamental needs are covered. Don't just, sink the house and your family doesn't have food or something like that to go after the business, right? But at the same time, if you wait until you've got the perfect time and perfect situation, you'll be waiting the rest of your life. So, and then I would also say, thirdly, especially when you're combining the technical with business, it requires, like we've talked a lot about, collaboration and networking. Don't neglect the relationship building, things like emotional intelligence, integrity. Those are really, really important, right? And you mentioned this earlier, and I've experienced this as well, where I've met these fantastic technical engineers. They're super talented. They're really brilliant. They're great at what they did, but they just unknowingly stymied their own career growth by being just horrible to work with. Nobody likes a condescending engineer. Don't be that person, right? And then kind of from pulling from my experience from Aerotech, actually, when I managed a group of manufacturing engineers and specifically that particular group, they would get 2 books from me when I would hire an employee. They would get the Machinist Handbook, which everybody's got to have, right? And then they would also get the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And we would actually work through that book in our one-on-ones together, because I think it's just so incredibly important to have somebody who's self-aware and driven and well-rounded. It's just as fundamental to their career as all of the other skills, the technical skills, right?
Yeah, great book. Do you have a favorite habit?
Being proactive, it's just, it kind of is really defining, and it leads to so many other areas, right?
I love that one. We have, I talked about CAD Club. We have tenets. Well, we have our own tenets for pipeline as well. And one of them is be respectfully aggressive. And I think that's along the same lines as be proactive, right?
Right.
Don't, if you need something from a vendor, don't just send an email and hope they get back to you in time. Or
Right.
if they say, hey, we can't deliver something for 3 weeks, don't just leave it at that. If it's really critical that you get it in 2 weeks, right? Call them up. Hey, I appreciate that you guys have your schedules. Probably no way you can help us here, but what would it take to get it to us in 2 weeks? You know, is there any way we can speed this up at all? Be respectfully aggressive. Someone told me the other day that maybe I should change that to be respectfully assertive because it sounds better. I kind of do like the word assertive, so maybe we'll see.
Yeah. I think the ethos there of the phrase is perfect though. Yeah, you've got to do it in a way, right, that you're considering the relationships, because whether you think you're going to need that person, and that's not a great way to talk about like I need this person or not, so I'm going to be nice or not. You got to be kind and considerate of everyone, regardless of whether they can reciprocate or give you anything, right? But it's very possible that they, if you treat them well, they're likely to treat you, well back, and that's just something that's important. But at the same time, you don't want to be, doormat, and you want to make sure that you're being proactive about, and that can be, it's just such a great mindset to have. And it doesn't mean necessarily, like you said, being aggressive in a non-respectful way. It just means, not waiting for things to happen to you.
Yes, absolutely. Is there a project that you've worked on at Poindexter that you can share? Obviously not giving away anything confidential, but something that you're particularly proud of. Maybe it was a design solution you came up with, or it could even be a business solution you came up with, but a project that you worked on that you're particularly proud of.
Sure. Yeah. This is a tough question. Like even in the last year, we've gotten to work on a variety of just awesome projects, from a major FEA project in the space industry to completely ground up designing this giant industrial automation machine from scratch. But I would really point out, and I have permission to mention these guys, this ongoing multi-year project with a company called Hyphen. So they're a food service automation company. Chipotle has publicly announced that they're partnering with them to some extent to bring automation to some of their new restaurant locations and things. It's a super exciting company to be working with. It's an exciting look into the future, just to see how automation can positively transform and enhance almost any industry, right? And we've gotten the opportunity to work with them, like I said, for a number of years, and it's a great example of building a great long-term relationship, right? And I like to point them out because we're integrating with their team. We're not just doing siloed projects. Like I said, we're working alongside their engineering team to work on a huge range of things to support their work, from robotic subsystems to, from scratch to DFM components, almost any manufacturing process you can think of: sheet metal, weldments, precision machined, additive, injection molding, over molded, injection molded parts, vacuum casting, precision casting. It's just been super exciting. Done a lot of analysis work for them as well, both CFD and FEA. And so it's been a real pleasure to see how that's developed. And it's a really cool product machine. So
amazing. What a good feeling. All right. Well, Keegan, actually, we'll do one more question and then wrap this up. What's one thing that you've done or observed to accelerate the speed of engineering?
Yeah. So a couple of things. Again, this goes back to being willing to adopt new technology and engineering tools. That's, picking up on shape when you're not necessarily interested in picking up a new CAD tool, right? But it made a lot of sense for being able to quickly engineer for other companies, right? I think another thing, like I said, is and often overlooked, it's not super flashy, right? Is how you manage your projects, how you deal with tasks, and how you handle that task organization. I mentioned 1IPM. I think that's something you can spend a lot of time managing your work especially when you're in a situation like us where we're trying to service a lot of different clients, a lot of different projects, a lot of different tasks, even within those projects. And you can spin your wheels for a huge percentage of your time, the slack time in between these projects. And so having a really clear roadmap of these are the tasks, these are the items, and a really clear we like a Kanban style, application. That's been huge. And then specifically, for our company, some of the other ways that we speed up our ability to engineer for clients is, again, lowering that engagement friction, having very flexible terms, not requiring these really lengthy formalized statements of work that are kind of prevalent in traditional settings. So those are just a few of the ways I think. And then, like I said, we see opportunity looking into the future for using some of these awesome AI tools to help us concept more quickly, or even, offload some of the repetitive tasks we identify. It's exciting.
Terrific. All right. Well, Keegan, thank you so much. What a fun time this has been, getting to know you and hearing some of your stories and backgrounds. How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a few different ways you can get in touch with us. So feel free to reach out on either my personal LinkedIn page or our company LinkedIn page, or through our website at poindexterbydesign.com. You can also feel free to email us. I'll give you our company email. That's info@poindexterbydesign.com. That'll make sure that either me or John see that. But love to chat. It doesn't have to be business related. It can be, where you're at in your career and things, and always looking to network with new engineers. So it's been
Terrific.
a real pleasure, Aaron. I thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Right back at you. Keegan, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Aaron Moncur, founder of Pipeline Design and Engineering. If you liked what you heard today, please share the episode. To learn how your team can leverage our team's expertise developing advanced manufacturing processes, automated machines, and custom fixtures, complemented with product design and R&D services, visit us at teampipeline.us. To join a vibrant community of engineers online, visit thewave.engineer. Thank you for listening.